Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 74, the Polytheist Death Guild, with our guest via Skype, Rebecca Lynn Scott. Hey Rebecca, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hey Gina, thanks for having me on the show.
For the sake of our audience, can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, my name's Rebecca Lynn Scott. I'm the founder of the Polytheist Death Guild and the author of A Litany to the Many Dead, which is 65 verses of prayers to those who have gone before us. The Polytheist Death Guild is, it's a group of us who have gotten together just to talk about the issues that are specific to polytheists and death, to talk about the afterlife, but also to talk about our funerals and what we need for them, to write articles and share information and rituals with each other.
Yeah, excellent. I saw somebody had posted it on Facebook and I was so excited.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, this is so awesome. Because, you know, I don't know if death worker is quite the right word I want to word choice I want to have, but one of my callings is to work with the dying, and I was just like, oh my God, somebody's actually doing something. Yay. So, what's the history behind starting this up?
Well, I am a member of a tradition called the Starry Bull, which is a Bacchic Orphic tradition. And I had written the litany as part of my own devotional work. And I was examining this, and I was examining the mythology of the Starry Bull, which is very focused on the afterlife. And I realized that we didn't have anything in the way of funeral rites, in the way of mortuary rites, in the way of mourning rituals. Nothing. And I said to some of the other members of the tradition, I said, well, what are we doing? Why don't we have these? They said, basically, because nobody's written it yet. And I sort of found myself volunteered for it. And then I was talking to people some more, and I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm ready. But I need your help. And somebody said, really, we should be talking about this with all the different polytheists. And I said, hey, that's not a bad idea. Let's do this thing. And off I go, because I needed another project, right?
Right. But it always kind of happens that way. My coven mate says that you get voluntold.
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's a human or a deity.
Yep. Yeah. So here we are, and it's taken off much bigger than I expected. That Facebook post went really big, and we had a lot of hits right away, just as soon as I had the site up. Wasn't even quite finished. I was still tinkering. And then the Wild Hunt linked to us, and that was pretty big too. So excellent. We just had our first public chat this week. And that went pretty well. We didn't have a whole lot of people, but it was a really fascinating discussion. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Well, I'm hoping to make one of the next chats if I can. Tuesdays is a little rough for me, for my scheduling wise, but
that's why we have one on Friday instead.
Oh, hey. Why do you think it's so widely popular? Usually when you think about death stuff, in general, people are kind of like, yeah, I don't want to talk about death.
I think it feels a real need in the community. I think that there are enough people who are either death workers themselves or have some other kind of interest in death, the way that you do and the way that I do, who have been really hungry for these conversations, and they just haven't been happening. One of the first people to sign on with us was is a mortician himself, and is a Kemetic, an Egyptian polytheist, and of course that religion is steeped in all of this lore about the dead, and he was saying that there's just no conversation about this in his community, and I was like, wow, I'm shocked. And he's like, we need this so badly. Thank you so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah, It's been very exciting.
So what is your own path to working with the dying?
I'm not quite working with the dying yet, but with the already dead. But I'm hoping to work with the dying. I've been a worshiper of Hecate for many years, and as I said, my Orphic Bacchic tradition is very focused on the afterlife and on the dead. And so I've always worked with the spirits of the dead to some extent. And then last year, uh, the litany just overtook me, and I wrote it in. It took me a couple of months to get it all done and together. I published as an ebook first, and then someone donated me the money to have it set professionally for print. So it's now a print book as well. And just I was writing, 3 and 5 verses a day, and then I'd take a day off because that was, and they're short, but they affect me so powerfully that
Right.
I needed a little recovery time afterwards. But and that has led me on to this, and now I'm looking into taking death midwife training,
Mm-hmm.
which is death midwives are involved in the home funeral industry. They
Right.
care for the dying and for the newly dead, for the bodies of those who've died. They help families to prepare the body for burial, washing the body, tending to the body. They help make people's deaths what they want them to be, so that if they want to die at home peacefully, if they want to die in a hospice institute, whatever they want, try to make that what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So really want to take that training and become a death midwife for the Hellenic uh, population, for the Hellenic community. I feel like we really badly need this. So many people, their families don't have any idea what to do, how to honor their family members' beliefs in death.
Right.
They don't have that.
Well, and especially in, you know, specifically the pagan umbrella communities, um, you know, a lot of people come from either, they're converting from a Christian background or some other major religion, or they're coming from, a place where their beliefs in the now aren't really known or learned about or talked about. So I think that is definitely a very important service for families, because
Yeah.
if your parents have no idea what the heck you believe, it's going to be really hard to help you in the dying process and with what you want,
Yeah,
that kind of
my
thing.
parents certainly have no idea. My wife does. My
Uh-huh.
wife tries to keep up pretty well. She's not pagan herself, but she used to practice Wicca for a while in college, so she has some background with it, and she is prepared to do whatever it is that I want. But she still needs to know what I want. So fortunately, by the time I'm done, she's going to have literally a handbook.
Hey.
I can just highlight the bits that are important to me
Yeah.
personally and say, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah, it's like, honey, do this and this, and you're good.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to reading the litany, because I saw the book, and we're gonna have it listed on our website, and we have an extensive book list, so it will be on our extensive book list. um,
Fantastic. Thank you.
you're welcome, and it'll be in the show notes too. And I'm really excited to get it, because I'm moving into. I feel like I'm personally moving into more of a different phase with a lot of my own spiritual work, and I also work with Hekate, so I'm like, oh, hey, another Hekate person, hooray!
Excellent.
um, and it's really interesting because she does help me with a lot of this work, and she's really present about it and all that, and people turn to me for advice on what to do if somebody passes or a pet passes or whatever.
Hmm.
But I know one of the interesting things that Hekate has been teaching me is that you can't stay in that mode all the time.
Yes.
And especially if you are the priest.
Yes. And that's why I at first, when I was looking at the death midwife program, I was thinking I might do this and offer my services generally, and then I was like, no, I can't. I can't be there all the time. I can't do that to myself. So I'm limiting my services to just the Hellenic community, whose rituals I'll understand better, whose point of view I'll understand better, and there's not a big community of us.
Right.
I did offer to fly across the country if a friend of mine were to die very suddenly. They were writing up their wishes should something happen, and I said that if it did, I would, as long as their family would pay for the ticket and put me up, I would fly across the country to the other coast and do all of the death rituals for them.
Wow.
They have no
awesome.
community there.
Wow. And yeah, that's a pretty amazing thing. And it kind of makes me wonder because, what do you do if you're in a community where your religion really isn't represented?
Yeah. And so many people have so much trouble with it. And, one of my friends in the tradition has been he's actually the founder of the tradition. He's been the go-to person, not just for our tradition, but for a lot of people who are sort of at that end of Hellenism. And so people will call him up and say, somebody died. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult to be put on the spot that way without anything to rely on. So you do vigils with the dying, right?
I have. I used to work for a volunteer program at Kaiser Santa Clara called No One Dies Alone. And I've mentioned this in another podcast too, but basically what it is that there's a group of volunteers, both people from the community and nurses and doctors, who volunteer to sit in 4-hour shifts with people in the hospital who are actively dying. So like if they have like 1 or 2 days to live. And it was an amazing program to be a part of. And, and I witnessed at least 2 people passing myself. And I've also sat with many, many people in the process of passing. And it was really intense, but it was really beautiful. Like, you really learn how to hold space.
Yeah, that's what I hear. I know some people in hospice work that I met through, actually, and I really recommend this to anybody who's interested in the topics, the Death Cafe. Have you heard about this?
No, I have not. What is that?
Death Cafe is part of my inspiration for the Polytheist Death Guild, and they happen all over the world, really. And it is a place to go, once a month or however often. That is just a discussion group for death. It's a safe space for anybody to talk about anything related to death. And you sit around over tea and cake, or my group does tea and cheese.
Excellent.
And you just sit and you have a conversation, and it's so wonderful and so moving. And our group is facilitated by a hospice minister, and he's just a great guy. I really like him, and we have several other people who do who have done hospice work, or we have a rabbinical student who is part of the community that cares for the Jewish dead. Mm-hmm. Does the washing of the body and those kinds of things.
I think that's amazing because we're so averse in our culture to actually talking about it.
Yes, and it is so. I think that's an illness in our society, really, and it's very distressing to me.
Yeah,
The Death Cafe is death positive.
Yeah, And it's interesting because, in a lot of the circles that I run, most of the pagan circles really, although some of my Christian circles are like that too, depending on who it is. Most of the circles I run around, death, people really talk about death, but not even then, even though they are pretty open to talking about death and dying and the need and like, getting all your paperwork done and getting your will done and all that stuff, there's still kind of that hesitation to really actively say, let's talk about this. What is it like for somebody to pass over? What is how does it feel to be part of someone's process? And, how does it feel to be a caretaker and all of that?
Yeah.
We just kind of like stop short of really fully diving in.
I agree. The pagan community, especially, we talk about death in symbolic terms. We talk about the afterlife, and we talk about death in the abstract, but we don't talk about the reality very much, and I think that's a real shame. And groups like the Death Cafe, and I think they're at deathcafe.com, and you can look up a local group. My city has 4 or 5. And the Order of the Good Death is another wonderful death positive group and was also an inspiration for me. And just, there are people out there doing the work, and it's just hard to get the word out. Because, again, people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. It's kind of, but, like eternal youth and longevity is kind of the name of the game especially in American culture.
Yes, very much so.
Not so much in other cultures though, which I find really fascinating.
Yeah, and I really envy that. It's just we hide everything to do with death, and it's such a shame because it is, as you said, beautiful, and it's part of life. It's part of what life is, and we just brush it all away. I was having a conversation with someone who said that they what was it? Their mother had died, and they had been there for the moment that their mother died, and then they stepped out for a minute, and the nurses didn't want to let them back in to see the body. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't want to see her like this. You don't want to see her like this. Yeah, that person did want to see her like that.
Right.
And it's important to let people have that, and to let people have that closure if that's what they need.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first death I witnessed was actually my great aunt. And, it was a really fascinating experience, a really moving experience, because, there was all of the family was around, and we had an amazing hospice person because it was a home hospice. And she was amazing. She did not interfere with us. She did not even do anything with the body until we said okay, and we had all said our goodbyes, and she was really amazing, and we thanked her profusely. But it was fascinating being able to be there in the room with her, watching as she passed. Like for me, I saw the goddess come and show her face to her, and the other people of other traditions who were with us, the rest of my family, saw different things or felt slightly different things, but the main like amount of love and peace and like that we knew she had passed and it was okay, that everybody felt that. And then to be able to be there to clean her up and to neaten up the clothing and do what we needed to do before the funeral directors came, it made her passing easier. It made the grieving easier.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Man, thanks for sharing that with me. That's such a special moment.
Yeah, and it's always stuck with me. And I think, we don't I don't think our society allows for that kind of grieving, that kind of letting people pass. I mean, sure, you've got people that pass suddenly, but they don't allow time, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think Do you have plans for the Death Guild to be kind of similar to the Death Cafe, and that maybe having pagan groups kind of spring up and get together and talk about death?
I would love to see that. That's not currently my plan. The chats are really the closest thing we have to the Death Cafe
Mm.
because it's so. I mean, you know how hard it can be to get together a group of pagans in the same place at the same time.
Right.
I mean,
That is so true. Yes.
so if people wanted to start pagan death cafes, that would be amazing. I would be bowled over by that. But in the meantime, what we do is we have these chats, and we you can find the link to the chats on the website. We
Mm.
hold them twice a month on the first Tuesday and the third Friday of the month at 9 o'clock Eastern time, and anybody's welcome. And we just usually I have some sort of starter question.
Mhm.
I try to just to get the ball rolling. And it's this first time was really really fantastic. We talked about uh, how we let our families know what we wanted, and actually several people did have firm plans that their families knew, uh, and so those were really fascinating. And you can actually, because Slack is a persistent chat room, you can actually go back and read the logs if you want to. It's there for you.
Oh, very cool.
And the chat room is always there. And if you see anybody else there, you can start up a conversation.
Do you think pagans have a kind of healthier expression of death? Because you've got Samhain and you've got other. I know other traditions have different ways of honoring the dead that are like
Yeah.
really public and open.
Yeah. I think in general we do have a healthier relationship with death, a healthier view of death. Uh, I just want to facilitate the conversation and take it further. But I think we're definitely yards ahead of the most of the rest of the country.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Samhain I know is a big deal for me, and I always see the need in people's spirit. They're like, "Oh, I'm so glad we have Samhain because then I can grieve with everybody else and I can be with other people."
Yes. Yes, and my tradition has anthesteria, it's called, which is an
Hmm.
ancient Greek ritual that's held usually in February. It just went past a couple weeks ago, and it's similar to Samhain. It's 3 days though,
Hmm.
and the spirits of the dead return to speak to us. It's also a festival of the opening of the new wine.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
in ancient Greece, this was the time when they opened the last year's casks of wine, and there's also a sacred marriage of the between Dionysus and the queen, and of course we do that symbolically. We don't have a
Mhm.
queen to do that,
Right, right.
but the wife of the archon of the city would go out to a special temple that was only open for anthesteria, and there were uh, 7 priestesses who knew the mystery and would teach it to her, and those were the only people who knew the ritual. But the dead come back, and we have drinking parties with the dead.
Yeah,
It's
that's
it's
cool.
fascinating. Yeah.
It's also I also think it's really cool that we celebrate the spirits. We don't a lot of people in general tend to kind of like say spirits are gone and that they've passed on, and I think a lot of the pagan community does some sort of ancestor type worship, and I think it's really interesting how much more present spirits are,
Yeah.
at least I know from my practice for sure, and it sounds like a lot of your practice too.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's a really healthy thing and a really good thing. I keep an ancestor altar up with masks two masks that I've made. I'm a weaver.
Oh, cool.
And there's actually a pattern for weaving a mask, and then you scrunch up the warp thread so that it forms a 3-dimensional mask. And I have those mounted, and I have a skull mask that a friend made for me. He's an excellent mask maker. And all of this laid out with my ancestors and my wife's ancestors, and I pray to the dead every day. I have and make offering. So yeah, very much a part of my practice.
What do you think people? What do you think is one of the big things that people just don't really understand about death and dying?
I think people don't understand just how natural it is in general. Pagans do better with this, but it's that it is not a thing to be afraid of. That it is as literally as normal as it can be. Everybody dies. Everyone. And that's, that's nothing to be scared of. That's nothing to I mean, you can fear violent death. You can fear, you can fear not having an afterlife. You can fear the void. You can whatever. But to fear simply the passing out of life, I think, is a great misunderstanding.
Yeah. And it's funny because it just reminds me of some of my own thoughts about my own death. It's like, I don't fear dying itself. I know, I've felt what happens during a death. So it's like, yeah, I think I'll be okay. But, it's the manner of my passing. And one of my fears I know, and I think this is also another big issue, is dying with indignity, not having my wishes respected, or dying in such a way that isn't good.
Yeah, I feel you there. That's one of my fears. I am especially afraid of being in a persistent vegetative state. That terrifies me, of being brain dead and my body not being allowed to die. The whole Terry Schiavo case.
Right.
That, or there was an even worse one where a woman was pregnant, and her body was kept alive to sustain the pregnancy, even though that just terrifies me. Oh.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. I mean, those are so sad. It was just like, no, I remember, especially with the Terry Schiavo thing, I was following that for a while, and it was just like, I was just like, no, just let her go. Yeah. But, and I know it wasn't my decision to make, but it was just like, it was really sad to me.
Yeah. And especially because she had left wishes not to be kept alive. She had an advance directive, and her husband knew it, and it was her parents that were fighting it. And it was so, we knew what her wishes were. This wasn't an ambiguous thing.
Right.
Really. And just, that is so sad and so frightening to me. And I have an advance directive, and my wife knows my wishes, and my family knows my wishes, and they're not to contradict my wife, and because that's so frightening to me.
Yeah, I'm I'm a bad death worker, though. We haven't formalized our wishes, although my wife does, and my parents do know what my wishes are.
That's the first step.
Yep, and that's a good thing. We haven't done the formal paperwork yet, although my parents have, and actually they're supposed to give me copies. I have to remember to mind my mother.
There's a great tool for helping you do this as easily as possible called Get Your Shit Together. Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
The website is gyst.com, I think. It might be a .org, but I'm pretty sure it's .com, gyst.
Awesome.
And it has the list of everything that you should get done and how long. It gives you estimates of how long it'll take to do each bit. And the first thing you do is you put together a team to help you and keep you on track.
Nice.
And it's real smart, and it's just very useful. All of these links that I keep talking about, by the way, are linked from the Polytheist Death Guild page under resources.
Well, we'll also have that, particularly that link. I love it. Well, we will definitely have that link in the show notes because, in fact, I know a few people that could probably use that link. So, like me.
I haven't finished the rest of it. I have the directive, but yeah, I still need to write up a will and things like that.
Yeah. Well, my parents really did theirs because my grandparents actually had their shit together. And when my grandfather passed, my aunt actually had to enforce the directive. But it made it so much easier on the family to have that there, and that we knew exactly what we needed to do, and we could definitely tell the doctors this is what they wanted and you can stop now.
Yeah, and it's so, yeah, my parents have a will. I don't know if they have advanced directives. I need to ask them about that. But my grandmother has hers together, my one remaining grandmother. I know she's got her shit together. I love it. I love this phrase.
I love it.
It just sums it up so nicely.
Right?
Yeah, but it's important. It's especially important if you have minor children. It is absolutely vital that you have a will, because if you die and you have children and they need to go to somebody, you have to have this defined, or they're gonna, there's gonna be a big fight. They may end up in the foster system for a while. This is scary.
Right. And I think like I was mentioning before, how it was easier for my family. I think it's a really compassionate gift you can give your family members.
It is. And it was very powerful when my grandmother was doing her will, because she went around to each of us and she asked us, what of my things do you want? And it became this, it let each of us think about what would remind us most of her. And I asked for her rings and and a few other little small things, just stuff that would remind me of her. And
that's really cool. I mean, go grandma.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And people think this is morbid to do, but in reality it wasn't at all.
Yeah.
It was very touching, and I think all of us were really moved by it.
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying before about, death being just a natural part of life. And, you prepare for school, you prepare for birth, you prepare for marriage, you prepare for other life transitions like that. Why not death?
Yeah. Yeah. And just people put it off because they're so scared. They're scared to talk about it. They're scared to think about it. Another thing I really recommend is a game called The Gift of Grace, which is a card game that there's questions on it for you to discuss with people. You get together in a little group and you play through these, and all of the testimonials say that how nervous they were beforehand, but how incredibly peaceful it was to actually talk about it, and how moving it was to talk about it. I still need to get my hands on a copy of this game because it just sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I'll have to find a link for it and see if I can.
I will send it to you.
Oh, that'd be great.
I will send you all of these links.
Excellent. We will have all of them in the show notes. Yay. Speaking of after death and funeral rites, what do you recommend for people? Because and you were mentioning about doing home funerals, and I think a lot of people just don't realize that they have a lot more options than just a funeral home.
Yeah, and you can. I think in all 50 states you can do home funerals. There's a home funeral association. Again, I'll send you a link. That with information about this. You do not have to have a body embalmed, with the exception of some states won't let you cross state lines with an embalmed body.
Right.
You do have to keep the body cold, but there are ways to do this at home. There are ways to, so you keep the body cold. You really want to wash the body, and I haven't had the opportunity to do this yet myself, but I really recommend it as a practice. It really allows you to connect with the death, to say goodbye, by all reports. It is just a beautiful thing, a last chance to give care to your loved one. And I mentioned earlier the rabbinical student in my Death Cafe group. And she talks about how in Judaism they apologize if they're doing any harm. They apologize to the body. They talk to it the entire time. I think that's so powerful, and I recommend that people do that. Talk to the body as you wash the body. You can buy cardboard caskets or plain wood caskets that will biodegrade. You can simply wrap the body in a bed sheet, and as a shroud. The easiest way to get a piece of cloth that big.
Right.
Wrap the body in a shroud, deposit it in the casket, take the casket to a resting place of your choice or a crematorium of your choice. And, there's all these options for green burial now. There's a green burial council that will help you find a place near you that does this.
Oh, I think green burial is amazing, actually.
Yes, isn't it?
Oh,
and
it's beautiful.
There's pretty much at least one in every state these days. And some states it's actually really easy to start your own. Somebody was just telling me in Wisconsin that any landowner, subject to county regulations, but basically any landowner can just declare themselves a green burial site and inform the state that they're taking burials that way. You can start your own family plot. My family has a family plot in West Virginia. It's on land still owned by the family. There's, I don't know, 20 or 30 people buried there from 6 generations. And I got the opportunity to visit it some years ago, and it was so beautiful and so moving to be there, to see all these generations of my family in the same place.
Oh, I bet.
To see my name on the grave of the woman I was named for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's it's just so beautiful. I guess there's a part of me that kind of doesn't understand why people, I mean, there is stuff that's ugly about death, or can be ugly about death, but a lot of it to me just seems really beautiful. So there's a little section of my brain that just doesn't understand why people are so bent out of shape about it.
I feel the same way. And I think that a lot of us go through, a lot of our traditions have initiations that really help with that. Out here in the Seattle area, there's a festival put on every year called the Spring Mysteries Festival. That's an attempt to recreate the mystery rites of Eleusis.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's wonderful, and I really recommend that anybody who is interested and gets the chance should go. It was really beautiful, and it was I've been twice, 3 times, something like that. And you really want to go 2 years if possible, because there are 2 levels of initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And it can, just as the original was designed to help you get over your fear of death, I think it could really help people.
Oh,
I
very
think
cool.
they do a good job.
That's really epic. We'll have to have a link to that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I met a few people at Pantheacon actually who had talked to me about that particular ritual, which I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's really cool. I won't be able to make it. I don't know if it's already passed or it's going to
There,
happen soon.
it happens Easter weekend, so it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to make it this time around, but
Yeah.
maybe next year I'll be able to do so.
Yeah. It is kind of pricey, but it's if you can manage it, and there's housing on site that is included in the price. So
Excellent. So what is kind of your vision for for the Death Guild as you begin it? You know, where do you see it hopefully going?
well, the biggest thing I want to do is I want to build a library of resources. I want to build a library of rituals, of information, of articles that people can turn to when someone in their tradition dies.
Mm-hmm.
I want the chats to become popular. I want to see people coming out for that and hold, like I said, the equivalent of a death cafe. Let people talk about what they need to talk about. And those are my 2 biggest hopes, is
Mm-hmm.
to get a library together and to get the chats going as a popular thing. I'd like to see. I'm planning on, when I finish my rituals, writing them up. I'm planning to publish that as a book, and I'm hoping that other traditions will gather enough material to publish their own books.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be really helpful for family members and tradition members to have a physical handbook that they can turn to
Right.
at these times.
Well, I'm actually kind of hoping to do that myself. I have a few books planned. I'm writing one about radical inclusion now, but the second book I want to write is for our tradition, is to kind of record like the history of our tradition and our tradition, everything, which will include death rites and rituals. So
Wonderful.
I'm working on it, I swear.
Awesome. Well, I hope you'll submit some of it to us, and we can have that up as files for people.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Well, we're just about out of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if people would like to get in touch with you to talk about the Polytheist Death Guild or any of the topics that we talked about today, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
I can be reached at polytheistdeathguild@gmail.com. You can go to the website, which is www.polytheistdeathguild.org, and there's a contact form there. Either of those are good ways to reach me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, and I'm really glad to have been able to have you on to talk about death because, I haven't done that very much, so I think it's fantastic.
Well, thanks for having me. It was really great to be on the show.
I'd like to thank Rebecca for joining us on This Week in Heresy. You can subscribe to This Week in Heresy via iTunes, the Stitcher app, or the podcatcher of your choice. You can also financially support this podcast through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave me a message through Twitter at TWIH Podcast or on thisweekinheresy.com.